Did I spell that correctly? S has two S's. Alright, looks good. Going that way. Okay, vertical. What else do I remember?
One-handed.
Okay, I think PI is busy at the moment. He said he'd be available soon. So
You have waited too long.
no, that did not go in my head. Must have connected to my phone.
To do something that you were doing for a while is when you do it and like you pick it up again. And every single piece of software in the stack of software that you use to do that task has an update. So yeah, it's been quite a while since I made a video, and I decided I wanted to make one, and so I had to update, audio hijack and screenflow and just the whole thing. So I've been listening some to Charles too, I forgot. I've listened to enough of his podcast. I should probably know how to say the name, but who's an objectivist philosopher. It's TEW if you want to look it up. Charles TEW, and he was podcasting and videoing heavily for a while, making YouTube vids. And then I guess he had some sort of falling out with another objectivist guy who also makes videos, and so Charles just stopped making videos, which is sad. But anyway, that's like gossip drama background.
Okay, that's a really bad description of what happened. It was not he had a falling out with a person. It's he had a falling out with himself. He contradicted himself. He made a fool of himself. He said a bunch of stuff, and then he said a bunch of stuff that contradicted himself. He went against his own claims. His problem was a clash with his own integrity, not with the other guy.
I've been listening to his podcast, and he happened to mention this thing that you're looking at, which is from Fee, the Foundation for Economic Education. It's a collection of essays called Discovering Ayn Rand. Now, if I recall, Charles just sort of mentioned it indirectly, and like I really had to do a deep Google and figure out, okay, what came out around the time of this podcast from Fee about Ayn Rand, and he gave a couple of hints. I was able to put it together. I don't like that though. He's mentioned he has an idea of, well, I think maybe he doesn't want to promote bad stuff. He didn't mention that, I think, with this specific material, but he's mentioned it in regards to other stuff, which I think is not a good idea because if readers want to judge something for themselves, or even, and maybe disagree with you, or maybe even just add another criticism that you might agree with, you should give them the opportunity to do that. Instead of sort of semi trying to hide stuff, which was ineffective anyway, because I figured it out. Anyway, so Fee made this collection of essays, and Charles had some high-level sort of general criticisms of them, as Fee just trying to sort of make Ayn Rand into a generic boring libertarian. So that got me interested because that sounded like something I would also disagree with, and I wanted to see some more details of that. So, and then I figured, well, if I'm going to look at that and criticize it, maybe I might as well make a video about it. And there's like a lot of material, so I didn't think I wanted to do sort of like a deep dive fisking in detail. Although maybe I'll change my mind and pick one or something. But a video seems like it might be better for sort of general broad skimming and criticism of a lot of stuff as sort of a shotgun blast of criticizing lots of little different pieces. So we'll see how that goes. Oh, and I have this over here, this Ulysses window, just in case I have some notes or thoughts or
Oh, okay, Justin.
anything. So let's go. Modern essays on her life and ideas. Okay. All right, let's see what we're looking at here. Ayn Rand's career advice is still on point. Okay. Action of the victim.
Oh, there's PI. Okay. So, the main things I remember, you're interested in realism and idealism. Also various, like, consciousness stuff. And you said you're an idealist. You said you're not a solipsist. But you said that reality exists independent of our minds, which is what I think realism means. So that part didn't make sense to me. And then you also raised a problem that I see as a problem within realism. How do we know about the external world? How do we like bridge the gap between our minds and the world to get knowledge of it? Which is a important major problem. I just don't see it as a problem as a reason to reject realism. It's just something we have to deal with. Wait, so you think reality is like hive mind? What? Can you explain it? Okay, so maybe he's typing somewhere. What? There's sound. That should work. I can see the audio levels.
Ayn Rand and the 20th Press, Rule of Objectivism. Did Edward Snowden draw his main inspiration from Ayn Rand? Oh, they don't like Trump. Crony in chief. Donald Trump epitomizes Ayn Rand's aristocracy of pull by Steve Simpson. So that's interesting. Because while there are certain instances or examples of Trump having bad economic policy that favors certain groups, like especially his tariff stuff. Overall, he's characterized by deregulation and wanting less government control. At least, often in fact, in terms of, loosening some environmental restrictions and various things, and certainly also in rhetoric in terms of like at least saying he opposes Obamacare, although that hasn't really been concretized very effectively in his presidency. But and Obamacare is a good example because you have you talk about aristocracy of pull, where you basically have the government, uh,
That's a very social way to write it. I don't know if it's supposed to be a joke. What? It's 2.6 speed.
completely regulating some area of commerce that's important and working with
I literally didn't even notice. I wasn't paying attention to what speed it was.
a few heavily regulated, sort of like government created oligopoly of a few entities, and literally forcing you to buy their product in violation of, the Constitution and the rights of man. That would more epitomize to me aristocracy of pull than some, I don't know, some like tariff BS, but we'll see. But yeah, they don't like Trump. Would Ayn Rand approve of rule by rich and powerful capitalists? No. Or, I mean, should, because that's sort of like, was Ayn Rand in favor of an aristocracy, maybe in the context of like our current situation where government is just doing a lot of stuff it shouldn't do. She wouldn't be opposed to rich and powerful capitalists. Certainly, she wouldn't be opposed to rich and powerful capitalists running legitimate.
Does anyone else want to make a tree or something? Could do multiple, because apparently it's going to take a while. I hate. Okay, so I don't find any of these statements clear. So, like, I wasn't talking to you, Jode. I was talking about Justin's comment. The Darlene thing is social, but it's not very notable, like I don't care. The thing Justin said is a normal way of manipulating people. Okay, so like reality is experience. What does that mean? So do rocks exist? Like, did rocks exist before human beings or animals existed? How about that one? What was there stardust and stars and asteroids and stuff before there were any consciousnesses? Hopefully you'll agree. And also, do you agree with my definition for realism? Like, do you agree this is realism? Okay, so I already put that, didn't I? Stars existed before there were any minds. Okay, so if you're saying yes to that, that sounds like realism to me, and I don't know how that fits reality as experience, because the reality of the rocks existed before experience existed. I don't get it. Right, it's like downplaying what you're saying. And it's acting like maybe it's a helpful suggestion, like I didn't think of it or something, which is not realistic considering I already had the video up while I was waiting for PI. There's nothing here that's explicit about joking or what the joke is or anything. Okay, now you're throwing in new words. Like, if we're trying to cover what the basics mean, and then you define them in terms of things like pan-experientialism, it's going to be very hard. We want to define terms, preferably in terms of simpler terms. Not in terms of more complicated things. We want to... Because if we define things in terms of more complicated things, we're going to spiral out of control with complexity. Wait, atoms are conscious? Or I don't know what have a form of consciousness means.
Government, like, if in a different society John Galt was wealthy and became president, that would be fine. But rule, I don't know. I mean, it depends on what you mean by rule and the context that you're importing into that. Trump's ego is actually too small, but Dan Sanchez. So that's the second F Trump in this table of contents. By the way, there's something that objectives talk about sometimes, where like Donald Trump is a second hander or whatever. I mean, which like I'm sure that's true because most people are, and because he's clearly concerned about appearances. But there's degrees of second-handedness. Like second-handedness, you can't just flatten everybody into second-handedness and say, well, he's a second-hander, so he's bad. I mean, in certain respects, you could say the person is bad, but there's a whole context there. It's sort of like if I don't know, Guy Francois and Ivy Starnes are on the ballot, which is basically like the last election, you vote for Guy even though he's a second-hander. Like honestly. Anyway,
I missed the word Ivy Starnes for someone.
Montreal learned the wrong lesson. You vote for Guy even though he's a second-hander.
E?
Like, it's sort of like if I don't know, Guy Francois and Ivy Starnes are on the ballot, which
Oh, Guy Francois. I always pronounced it Guy, but I'm probably wrong. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, so you think that like atoms have a different degree of consciousness and we just have like more consciousness or mind or whatever? I'm having a hard time telling the difference between this and just saying like everything has a soul and that's what makes it real. And like humans have a bigger soul than trees, have a bigger soul than rocks, which have a bigger soul than silicon atoms.
ballot, which is basically like the last election, you vote for Guy even though he's a second-hander. Like honestly. Anyway.
I mean, I didn't think you would say that, but I couldn't tell the difference, like how the claim is any different. Okay, I guess I'll just label them like this. So this explains like the mystery of reality as experience. So it's not before any life, or maybe it's before any life, but it's not before any consciousness. Maybe why it seems similar to the soul thing to me is they both appear to me to have absolutely zero evidence and just be made up magical thinking. And they're both an immaterial thing you can't touch or see that like has special properties. Allegedly.
Anyway, Montreal learned the wrong lesson from Iran. That's very specific, but okay. Like just geographically, like it doesn't tell me. Like wrong lesson about like oil policy or what. Like there's not a lot in there. Anthem and the meaning of the light bulb ban by Ayn Rand. That sounds like it might be okay. Most of these I'm not. Most of these I'm either not clear what the topic is or it sounds bad, but that one sounds okay. I mean, we're not clear on like where they're going with it. Like Ayn Rand's career advice. Well, I mean,
So this is pretty unclear to say I said guy for years or Guy, because it's I mean you wrote it. Like the writing, it doesn't tell me the pronunciation. Because if Guy is pronounced Guy, then you're saying I said Guy for years. Well, I don't think experience is contingent upon organic life. But I don't think atoms have it either, or rocks. But like I think an AGI could have experience. Organic just means there's carbon atoms involved. You could use silicon atoms instead. I don't know what this means. This sentence is a typo or something.
we'll see. I don't know if I'm actually gonna read all these. I mean, I'm not gonna read all them on the video, but we'll see how much I actually get into and how much I just skim a little bit and say, oh, I'm just gonna move on from this. What critics get wrong about Atlas? Mostly, I mean, just one thing offhand is that they don't seem to realize that Atlas Shrugged has bad rich people in it, which is a really just like.
I think it's funny that the up next is my own stream that I'm currently streaming. And that's what they want to like autoplay next for me.
That's just a factual matter. You know, Oren Boyle has a character in Atlas Shrugged and some other ones, like, but they're just like, oh, Ayn Rand liked rich people. She wanted rich people, you know, for everything. No, it depends on how you got the wealth. It depends on the whole context. Only a lot of these. Okay. What Ayn Rand meant by altruism. Oh yeah, so this is the one. Maybe it's page 70. Maybe I'll just jump down to that one because that's one that Charles was really complaining about, and I could see that being especially bad. Ayn Rand on fascism. We cannot must give up our ideals. Well, it depends on what your ideals are. A totalitarian state can only rule a desperately poor society. Well, that's true. Like in the long run, right? Like you can always pick out a point. It's like, well, it just became, if you pick out the point like the second after, or even the year after a totalitarian state has been created, but it's still drifting on the fumes of the liberty that preceded it. You'd say, oh well, see, like people do that a lot with socialism. I was reading something where it was basically arguing that the famous Scandinavian socialist countries were pretty free up until the 60s, and they're still like not fully socialist. They're just they're welfare states that are heavily tilted in one direction, but they're still like mixed economies with a large private sector. Which you can do for a long time. Ayn Rand Sovietologist, Ayn Rand Centennial Appreciation, Ayn Rand Historic Life, Ayn Rand if Atlas Snapped.
Discovering Ayn Rand PDF.pdf. Oops.
That day I interviewed Ayn Rand. Daniel Brandon, rest in peace. And Ayn Rand, the movies and the idea of America. So this section sounds like it's probably at least interesting to me. So where do I want to start? Well, Ayn Rand meant by altruism was pretty short. It's a bookmark. You make a PDF and you put bookmarks in it when it's like a collection of essay. Terrible. Oh wait, is there actual links? Oh, that might work. Never mind. Although yeah, there we go. Okay, that works fine. All right, so let me look at this one. Ayn Rand meant by altruism. What Ayn Rand meant by altruism? Rand sold more than 30 million books. Atlas Shrugged has been ranked behind only the Bible as an influence on readers' life. She has also been stridently attacked for issues such as her militant atheism. Perhaps at least
people bring that up too much. Like, oh my god, she was popular. Like, I think they like the prestige of it. Like, it's a notable fact. I don't think people should never bring it up. I think, but it seems to get, like, over attention. Like, she did well in one stupid survey. It's not like those surveys are done very well, and it's not like she did well in all of them. They just, like, one time, she got a really good score in a survey. I don't know how often they do surveys, but it seems to be mentioned more than it deserves.
least understood has been her full bore rejection of altruism. On her birthday, it is worth reconsideration. I mean, I don't know how much the birthday mattered.
Yeah, I agree also that the birthday is not a relevant factor here.
Altruism has commonly been held up as the standard for moral behavior, but Rand rejected it, asserting, well, really arguing, but it was incompatible with freedom, with capitalism, and with individual rights, and therefore the basic evil behind today's ugliest phenomenon. That head-on collision arises from French philosopher Auguste Comte, right? Coiner of the term altruism. The altruist.org website says he believed the only moral acts were those intended to promote the happiness of others. Just a writing issue, but I'm not sure what head-on collision specifically is being referred to. It says that head-on. Oops. So that head-on collision. Like I get the general idea that this person, Mr. Gales, is saying that there's a conflict between Rand and Comte and altruism. That's true, but just the writing is a little strange. Anyway, that's a minor point. So Catechisme Positiviste, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it like in Spanish. I always do that when I see French for some reason. It's kind of funny. I don't know French, I know a little Spanish. Asserts that altruism gives a direct sanction exclusively to our instincts of benevolence and therefore cannot tolerate the notion of rights. For such a notion rests on individualism. In Comte's view, any action performed for any reason beyond solely that of advancing someone else's well-being is not morally justified. That implies taking a tax deduction for a charitable act strips it of its morality. The same is true when something is done because what goes around comes around. Something as seemingly innocuous as feeling good about doing good also fails Comte's joyless standards. Even love your neighbor as yourself fails his unlimited duty of altruism. As George H. Smith summarized it, one should love one's neighbor more than oneself. Ayn Rand's attacks on altruism are aimed at Comte's definition. No. They're aimed at altruism broadly, and certainly including the pure form, which sort of takes everything to its logical conclusion, but also including the mix, which is the prevailing, just like the mixed economy is the prevailing approach to economics in the world right now. There's no laissez-faire capitalism really, and there's very little that's even striving to be pure collective, socialism or communism or whatever you want to call it. Likewise, there's very few purely individualistic people, and there's not really many people making any real effort to try to live by the impossible standard of altruism. But what people do is they hold up altruism as an ideal, and recognizing that as a practical matter, in fact, you can't live by altruism. They nonetheless, so they try to some like limited and consistent extent, which causes problems in their life and which opens them to attack from people who want to get something from them. But then they also smuggle in some individualism, which they feel bad about occasionally, sometimes, although they don't really make any systematic effort to try and resolve that issue one way or the other, like either moving more consistently towards individualism or really trying to give altruism a go. They just put up with this sort of chronic state of mixed morality, where they accept the premise of altruism, but then try and live in the world in this confused way. And so, they buy a bunch of stuff.
Okay, so I'm having a hard time getting simple answers. Like, how do you know that rocks have a little bit of consciousness? Is this supposed to be an answer to that, or is this just an argument about, like, why other philosophies are wrong? Like, do you think your position is, like, scientific and rational and stuff? That, like, everyone should believe it? Is there a scientific way to get to it?
A bunch of stuff for themselves, which they should. I'm not criticizing that. But then they'll give, some amount of money to a beggar because they feel bad, or they'll support some political cause because, it's going to make the world better or something, on altruistic grounds. So yeah, no, Ayn Rand was not just against the purest form of altruism, although certainly she was against that, but the pure form of altruism is sort of a subset of what Ayn Rand was against, which was altruism completely, altruism as an ideal, altruism as a partially realized thing. No, she was against that. Now that's not to say, and she's argued this very well herself, but just to make it clear for anybody who's not familiar, this is not to say that Ayn Rand was against benevolence or against, charity in any context or against kindness or anything like that. It's that she was against.
Oh, by the way, we could go in voice chat if you wanted to. I don't know if that would be easier or harder.
The idea that the lives of other people were sort of the standard, and them being happy was sort of the standard by which you should judge whether an action was good. She said, no, you should live by the standard, by the standard of your own life, realize your own goals, increase your own power, intellectually, financially, whatever values that you want. And then if you want to help other people in the context of a life where you are, primarily fulfilling your own values and figuring out the stuff that's of value to you and what you want to do, if you decide, well, I can help this person and it's not a big deal to me, but you see some value in helping the other person, then that's fine. But it's not a primary. And I remember her saying something like, charity is just not a big value. It's not primary. It's fine. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with it. But it's just not a big deal. So, and it is a big deal if it's motivated on any sort of altruist premise of like, well, because the same act can have different motivations.
Testing. Justin, you want to jump in and say something and see if it shows up on stream correctly? This should be set up. Got my my loop back. I just
Hey,
installed.
how are you doing?
Oh, hello.
Yep. Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah, looks like it's working.
Cool. Let's see here.
Oh, Justin, can you hear pessimistic idealism? Just to make sure.
Okay, cool. So, how are you doing? I'll only be able to be on voice chat for 15 minutes or so, but then I should be able to be on in like 30 minutes or so after that. But in the time
Okay.
being though, we could just chat. So, yeah, sorry for the cryptic responses. But yeah. So I'm looking at the idea tree right here. Okay. So you're a realist. Reality is independent of mind. So stars existed before there were any minds or consciousness. Doesn't bring atoms into being or determine how they behave. Hmm. Okay. So I would say that I'm a realist in a just an epistemological sense. So I believe if I close my eyes right now, I mean my room won't vanish. Essentially, I mean it's not like if everyone closed their eyes that I don't know, like the sun will vanish, things like that. Rather, what I'm holding is more of a metaphysical position that tries to accommodate for the problems of subjective experience, and that's something I don't think we can really deny, like subjective experience, that is, without just absurdity. I think. For example, if we were to say that, um, like if we were to take the eliminative materialist route and just deny consciousness altogether and say that it doesn't even exist, it's just an illusion. I mean, I would think that would be absurd. But I'm curious in regards to the objectivist position on the issue of consciousness and mind. How do you see yourself faring between um, the more scientific approach or like a functionalist or computational approach to the issue?
I don't know all the fancy words and I don't care about them.
Okay, that's fine.
I just think reality is out there, it exists. I don't see the point of most of the philosophies of this stuff. I'm not
Mhm,
denying consciousness
mhm. Okay,
or subjective experiences in any normal sense of the word, like people experience things. I
cool,
just think
cool.
that that is a product of physical reality, like of atoms and computation and so on, rather than like magic. Like it's part of
Okay.
physics.
Yeah, that's fine. That's I wouldn't call what my position, magic. That's something too. I'm not a, supernaturalist by any means, or, I
Okay,
don't hold consciousness, as supernatural either.
yeah, but I'm not getting what it is then, because it seems to be different from my position. So if I'm
Mhm.
just like physics and reality, and then you're something different, I don't know what it is.
Sure. So, when we speak of matter, let's say, what do we mean by it? In the sense of just the everyday experience, rather than the actual scientific approach. So it means like a concrete object of sorts. There's something there um that is present to us. Like it's, for example, this laptop right here. It's a solid object.
Sure.
Or let's see, I don't know, when we talk about like of course I'm blanking right now, but you know what I mean. Just a physical object that is apparent to
Rocks,
us.
chairs, doors.
Perfect. Yeah. Things like that. And when we speak, yeah, air too, you could say that.
Yes,
Joda
there
or
are
whatever
air
that.
atoms.
Yes, yeah. Um, we could keep the problem is when we try to figure out how something that is not experiencing anything. So if we were to take the purely realistic route, or the realism route of things, and to say that existence is not, there's no correlation essentially between existence and consciousness. There was a time when there was only existence, non-conscious matter, essentially, and then there was a time billions of years later when there is something that is conscious. And whether that be like a microbe or some kind of like insect, things like that, it really just making the jump essentially from no consciousness to consciousness is something that I don't believe is logically possible without contradiction. And this is something that I actually bring up in that article, speaking of Ayn Rand and her account on the issue, where she takes a conceptual account of consciousness. So essentially, she defines it as just being aware of something and our capacity to aware, like a faculty of some sort. And she says that existence is not dependent upon consciousness, and there was a time when there was just existence without consciousness. Okay, you could hold that position. However, when you do that, you have to take into account the transition process, if there is a transition process at all. So, I mean, you could say, oh, well, yeah, there's no, uh, like, you could take like an eliminative materialist route and just say there's no um, subjective experience at all. And it's really just a kind of an illusion, but that's not really tenable. And it goes against what Rand says. But my issue is when we try to figure out how a consciousness can be conscious of something if you could not be conscious of nothing. So that's something that Rand also holds. So you can't have an intermediary stage where there's consciousness, but it's not conscious of anything. And there's a stage when there's conscious where a consciousness that is conscious of something. So you can't really make the three-step process essentially from nothing to consciousness without anything to be conscious of, and then consciousness that is conscious of something.
Okay, hold on. Slow down. Let me
Sure,
get this into the tree.
sure.
Alright, so what should I put as the first step in the argument?
Sure. So I actually can send you this Word or like HTML document that just goes over exactly what I'm
Okay.
saying here. And you'll be able to copy and paste from it too. So let me just save this as an HTML file. Um, okay. And I'll post this in the idea tree section.
Okay.
Okay, so it's been posted. So for each of the three steps I go through, I have a different you could call it just like a little sign or like a little symbol. So I have CX, CY, and CZ to distinguish the three stages. Um, and we CY, the middle stage, is a contradiction, so it can't exist. Um, and we can't then get from CY or CX to CZ without an intermediary stage. And so we get into problems there. So this is purely coming from a logical or conceptual perspective. So just rearranging the concepts essentially, just to see if they actually flow together for internal consistency. But um, there's apparent problems contained within there.
Okay, so there's some problem in the middle stage. Is this like original or is this something other people believe and have written about?
Someone tried talking about this in two sentences in a book that I read about Ayn Rand, and someone actually, an objectivist, responded to this with the claim that, well, this guy's getting it wrong. There's a before a child is born, they have the potentiality essentially to be conscious of things in the world, and so there's no contradiction there. But this essentially, this essay of sorts was a response to that, and to show that even if that were true, it would still be untenable and inconsistent with Rand's own position. And so, yeah, this is a very detailed but thorough account of the matter. that is kind of at the core of objectivist canon, in the sense that it kind of it exposes a problem in one of the three axioms, the three metaphysical axioms of objectivism. Well, I shouldn't say an axiom, but rather one of the corollaries, that consciousness is existence is not dependent on consciousness, essentially, or there's no the two are not correlatives. So one came before the other, essentially. And if this is true, then they'd have to modify one of their additional arguments. And they'd either have to say that consciousness can exist and not have content, and so just be conscious of itself or be conscious of nothing, or they would have to say that consciousness was always apparent somewhere down the line of since the beginning of the universe. It's always been essentially a nascent feature of matter, essentially, or they'd have to try and modify something else. So it's kind of within the whole mechanism, essentially, that there's some inconsistencies there.
Okay, I've got some questions.
Sure.
So, you said basically there's a problem with jumping from not conscious to conscious.
Yes.
Doesn't
If we
that jump-
hold. Oh, sure. Yeah, continue.
Doesn't that jump happen whenever you have a kid? Like, the fetus is not conscious, and then at some point they're conscious?
This was actually the original topic of the debate that I had with an objectivist. And so the problem is, if we believe, so let me just pull up my copy of this. If we believe that there can be no such thing as, or actually, you know what? I'm just going to scroll down all the way to some of the most simple arguments that I think the premises are pretty self-evident. I mean, I tend to approach these things deductively. And let me just scroll down all the way. Okay. So we would agree that, according to Rand, she says that consciousness is the faculty of perception. I personally don't agree with this, but for the sake of it, we could just say that it's true. And
Okay,
that
I don't
perception.
have a strong opinion about that.
Sure. And we would say, I both agree, I think that perception is an activity.
Sure.
Yeah. And only what is, so I'm not sure if you're familiar with Aristotle's notion of potential and actual. So if something is actual, it exists in actuality. I mean, it's like a concrete thing of sorts, while a potential is like a possibility, or it's something that exists in the abstract. Like, for example, my water glass has the potential to fall and break, but it's not falling and breaking right now. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So
that's well known without any Aristotle, right? That's just a standard idea today. Okay.
Yeah. And I think we'd also agree that only what is actual can be active. So
Sure.
yeah, I mean, it kind of goes with the name too, or the actual word, actu and actual. So therefore, only what is actual can perceive. So, and that's fine then, because
Sure.
perception is an activity. Okay. So when I say CX here in the next step, I mean that a consciousness, a faculty of consciousness that is purely a potential. So if we take a fetus, let's say an unborn fetus, and it is unable to, it's not perceiving anything. Essentially, there's nothing for it to perceive. Or we could even go further back too, and like when sperm meets egg, or like a zygote, or something like that. Will we say that it's perceiving anything? Probably
I don't
not.
think so.
Yeah. And if consciousness is the faculty of perception, then you would need an actual consciousness, a consciousness that is conscious actually in order to perceive, as opposed to something that is purely potential. So if I were to reorganize all of the, I don't know, if there's a thought experiment of, if you had everyone in China holding up like transistor radios or something like that, like 1 billion people, you would ultimately be able to replicate like the actual the network of like neurons essentially in the brain. It's a weird experiment, or a thought experiment, but it, we don't need to go into that. But essentially,
Oh,
you can't
yes.
have.
Something vaguely along those lines would be
Yeah,
implied by brains being computational,
exactly.
because you can do computation in other ways, including spread out over time and distance.
Mhm. And we would also say that a consciousness, a potential consciousness, can only become actual. It can only be actually conscious if and only if it has content or acquires content somehow. However, a consciousness cannot be actual um, unless, of course, it somehow gains that conscious content. But it can't gain that content unless it is actually conscious. So you get into a vicious regress here. It's
Oh, I
like
don't agree with that at all. It's like with a computer, you can write initial data on the hard drive without turning the computer on. Like it's physically possible to get initial data into things.
so. Let me try to transition this into something a bit more concrete. So I give an actual like rather than the lines and things. I give an example of a where is it? Here we go. So I give an example of a drainage pipe. And I also have another example too of a like a room essentially, and like a room with a door. And let me find it here. It's in an old conversation that I had. I could just send this in the so that yeah, that drainage pipe example that's scrolling. If we were to scroll down, it's contained in an HTML file. Let's see here. Room. Let's see here. Ah,
I don't
here
know
we
why
go.
quantum physics is being brought into this, Jode. Like, I don't think he or I were making claims about quantum physics. And I don't see how bringing quantum physics up would harm or help either of our positions. It seems like it would just add a lot of complexity.
Here we go. So I found the example. So there is a room with one door, and there are three people standing outside the room, waiting to get inside. The door to the room must be open in order for the people to get inside the room. The door is currently closed. The door cannot change from closed to open unless there is at least one person inside the room. But there is no one in the room, so the door cannot be opened. Therefore, no one would ever be able to enter the room, and it will remain empty. So the room, i.e., the faculty of consciousness, that has the potential for being conscious, but is not conscious actually, cannot be filled with people or content, essentially, so the content of consciousness, unless the door is opened. So the consciousness must be actually conscious in order to actually have content. You can't be conscious of something and not be conscious at the same time. So the door cannot change from closed to open, i.e., be active, unless there is at least one person inside the room. It must have content. But there is no one in the room, i.e., no content, because Rand believes that there's nothing essentially in the mind prior to your being conscious. So the door cannot be opened, essentially, because there cannot be activity without content. So those are the two key things that are for Rand, that you cannot have content of consciousness and not be active on that content. So content and action imply each other. They're essentially two correlatives that are always present at every stage or in every aspect of consciousness. Um,
I
so
haven't carefully read Rand's claims about that. you might have
Sure, sure.
found a hole in them, but I don't agree with this as how things work, because I think you can get data into a mind in other ways than perception. Like you can fiddle with the neurons to just write things into memory, or
Mm.
when the genes create all the proteins and like create the mind in the first place, I think they put some initial stuff into it.
Hmm. Yeah, sure, sure. I mean, I wouldn't say. I think we should. I mean, according to Rand, she distinguishes between mind and the brain. So, I mean, I believe in the possibility of there's like an old thought experiment called like philosophical zombies, essentially. So you could have a person that is um, completely physically identical to another person, and that duplicate um, does not have or experience conscious states. Rather, they're just like an automaton, essentially. So they act like they're experiencing like they have phenomenal experience. So they see the redness of an apple. They taste the sweetness of it, and they have their the person that is not the duplicate, they have all those sensual experiences, while the person that is the duplicate, essentially, so the automaton, they do not experience that stuff. That's all um, subjective experience. That all of those experiences are a qualia, essentially, as opposed to just unconscious brain states, which would be what the duplicate is experiencing. Or not experiencing actually, because it's not experiencing anything. It's rather just a brain essentially that's active, like brain states essentially that are at work up there, but no conscious activity. So there's nothing it is like to be that duplicate or that clone of sorts. Only the original person. It is like there to be something. Um,
Why?
well, it's logically conceivable. There's the difference between empirical. If something is empirically, um, like nomologically true or nomologically conceivable. So according to laws of this universe itself, so the physical laws um, of nature, it's not possible in our world to replicate a person completely, have the completely physical makeup of their body, their brain, completely, essentially reverse engineered and then restructured into a um, another person. It is conceivable that that new, um, if you want to call it that new reconstruction, essentially, does not experience conscious states. Rather, it is purely just acting on um, instinct, and it's not. There's nothing it is like to be that person. There's no self-reflection there, even though it might appear that there is self-reflection and contemplation going on. It is not happening actually. It is purely just going through the motions of sorts. This thought experiment was essentially pioneered by Dr. David Chalmers, a famous a philosopher of mind. Um, it's controversial, but it's an interesting thought experiment. Um,
Okay, so I think if you have two identical physical objects, then their properties, such as consciousness, would also have to be identical. Is that something you disagree with?
I would say that consciousness cannot be explained in the sense that how should I put this? It can't be explained. So the experience itself, the phenomenal experience, cannot be explained using traditional scientific explain. It cannot be reduced essentially to purely unconscious processes. It is rather something that is essentially simple. It does not have parts. It can't be broken down into, like, for example, when I have an emotion, that emotion does not have parts. It's not like a puzzle that has puzzle pieces. Rather, it is something that is a whole, essentially a unity. And the same is true too For if I were to look outside right now and I were to perceive the whole world around me at the moment, um, or not the whole world, but you get what I mean. It would not be a mere collection of discrete things. Rather, we are kind of thrown into the world, and from there we have to identify blobs of color as like an apple. Identify a tree from just sensations of green and brown, essentially, that are contrasting with each other. And it's essentially through these contrasts that we come and understand something as like an entity or an object, as opposed to just mere sensations. And it is that phenomenal experience, that unity, that cannot be really broken down into physical processes, because it is a simple thing. So it's not compound. Rather, the experience is not compound. Rather, it is a simple thing, and you
So
can't really get a just simple from um, compounds. Essentially, it works the other way.
do you think this stuff is outside the realm of science?
It's not necessarily. It's definitely something that science tries to. Well, there's many different scientists that hold different things. In the realm of philosophy of science and the philosophy of mind, panpsychism, which is essentially the belief that bits of matter themselves, they have some kind of proto stage of consciousness. And that's to account for the transitional process from lower stages of consciousness or lower degrees, essentially like an ant or a fly, into something more complicated, like a rabbit or a dog, then going up into like an ape, into like a human being. So it accounts for the transition. Um, in regards to scientists, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that some that deal with the philosophy of mind or dealing with neuroscience, it would not be foreign or absurd to them,
Well, I wasn't
based
trying to
upon.
ask about actual scientists. I was trying to ask about the theoretical limits of science.
I
Like,
think that it.
is it something that we can deal with through empirical observation and tests and so on, and
Hmm,
measuring?
hmm. It's difficult to say because the ability to measure is contingent upon someone that is consciously measuring. So it's kind of like you're trying
No, it's not.
to.
We can set up like robots to measure things.
Well, in order to observe the machine, in order to actually get the readouts of it, we'd have
Well,
to
for us
be
to
able
think
to.
about it, we have to look at it. But
Yes, yes. So it would be kind of like trying to, kind of like Hamlet to go up inside of the attic of his castle, trying to look for Shakespeare. Essentially, it's you're try and uh, essentially work outside of the canvas in order to get an idea of the canvas, and I don't think that you can really do that through the empirical methods of science. Rather, you'd have to take a more um, phenomenological, in the sense like studying subjective experience firsthand, just by getting a sense of what someone is experiencing at a certain time. What are they able to like a psychology, essentially? I don't know if you take psychology to be a rigorous discipline. I think in some respects it can be, but
not
it's not.
rigorous.
It's mostly um, theorizing, and it's very a lot of the theories, especially when you go into like Freud, it becomes arbitrary. But it becomes difficult, and but I don't think that it would be appropriate to suggest that it can be completely reduced just because we're able to identify correlations essentially between conscious states and physical processes. So, for example, we're able to account for the fact of like storing information in the brain. We see a correlation between like memory and brain states. We also see that in perception too. We're able to see a correspondence there. However, none of those correlations are able to account for the fact that there is an experience that goes along with each and every single one of those brain states that we call conscious brain states. It's like we can have um, yeah, it didn't have to be a conscious state. You could just have had a purely mechanistic, um, or not conscious at all process going on there. And who knows? That might have even well, you could say that it's the fact that we have a subjective experience to go along with conscious states. That it's evolutionally, um, for survival purposes, it's a better, it's more productive or more successful, essentially. But it's I wouldn't say that it's something that can really be, um, approached using traditional scientific methods, I would think, but that's just my take on the issue.
Okay, well, the big picture is I still don't really see the point of any of this. Like, what should I do differently in my life because of it? What does it affect? Or for the philosophy stuff I work on, like how to do critical thinking and rational thinking and
Mhm.
learning, does it have any bearing on that? Like, should I get a different conclusion about anything?
I would say that you definitely can. It definitely can alter people's the way that people go about their life. For example, it's the fact that if they um, tend to, let's take a person if they're very, they have like a fear of, um, let's say like you. I don't want to say like you're immortal. I don't want to say that, but if they're like, what's the point in living? There's no real comfort there, or they even just if they're just captured by the like the sublime feature that we there's something it is like to be us. There's an experience that goes along with our physical processes.
Well,
Also,
that's not an issue I have. Like, you're imagining a person who partly agrees with you and is already thinking about some of these things.
well, sure, we could even go to more of a just a pragmatical route too. If we look at um, like self help, essentially. So if we need to, if someone has a is essentially self conscious, they have anxiety issues. If we need to get a better understanding of um, the mind, essentially. Well, I think, yeah, in the term of like, if we were to take it like an Aristotelian, well, we need to figure out the causes of the phenomenon, or we need to figure out the nature of it. Um, and we can't. I don't think we could do that in regards to the actual experience, the subjective experience, which is something that we are so familiar with that we take for granted, essentially. That we more often than not we tend to ignore the fact uh, uh, that we are experiencing um, something that is incredibly. Um, yeah, I mean, it's almost i- i- inexplicable. Essentially, it's a phenomenon that can be really, uh, if ignored or overlooked or reduced to purely physical processes. I mean, it could drive someone into a like a nihilism of sorts, I would think, but that's just my view. I mean, I think you
Okay.
could take a different routes depending on what background you're coming
I've
from.
I've written self-help stuff, including this essay on emotions, and like if you could come up with any corrections where I got something wrong, that would interest me.
Sure, sure. I'll take a look at that.
Like, that would be the kind of application where it actually applies to something I do that would make it seem like it matters to me, in my view.
Mhm.
Because most of it, I just find it sounds like people are saying a bunch of stuff and they don't have clear ways to establish who's right, and it doesn't really have much impact on anything.
Curry is much softer than oh boy. Yeah, I'm just looking at the chat here to see if there's any questions. Oh, let's see. Uh,
They were talking about quantum mechanics for some reason.
yeah, I don't think that can lead to. I feel like I mean I have some friends that have gotten degrees and that kind of stuff, but I feel like if anyone I mean, I'm certainly I have no I mean, I know some general stuff, like, about it, but nothing that would make
Yeah,
me,
I know a lot about it because of David
yeah.
Deutsch. But I don't see how it matters to our
Yeah.
conversation.
I think it could be abused as well. You see, like, hoax, or quacks like Deepak Chopra, essentially, like, talking about all that stuff. I mean, it could really be, that's why I'm very hesitant to rely I tried to take, like, a very deductive approach as opposed to taking one that's, I try to start from, like, self-evident or essentially necessary premises, um I don't wanna well, I shouldn't say necessary, but, like, only what is actual can change. That's self-evident. Only, like, change is an activity, that's self-evident. Taking a route of that sort I mean, I'm very skeptical of induction, which I was, glad to I recently watched your video, on, Henry or no, is it Harry Binswanger? I can't remember his
Oh
name, but
yeah,
you were on, the
Gunslinger.
forum. Yeah, yeah, about, yeah, how objectivists were coming at you for calling it, like, primacy of consciousness for, because you didn't agree with, the the canonical you could put it that way, but the route of, like, concept formation or even just induction, essentially, how many objectivists hold induction to be sacred, which it's not.
Yeah,
Or
Binswanger
confused
was
that it's
weird.
concept. Yeah.
He likes to talk about perception and consciousness stuff, but he said computers don't compute. And then I tried to find out what he meant, and he said, read my book. And I did, and it said things like computers don't compute, and it did not explain it. And I never figured out what he was talking about.
Isn't that the meaning of, like, the purpose of a computer?
That is what I
That's
thought.
yeah, that's kind of strange. But, yeah, that is very weird. Um, but I'm actually gonna have to, head off for a bit, but, yeah, it
Okay.
was nice talking to you. So I hope, that clarified things up a little bit, but, yeah, it was nice
Yeah, a
talking to you,
little.
though. Yeah,
All right, later.
see ya.
People give me conflicting volume reports. Like, Justin says the guy's too quiet, and then Priest says he's too loud. So, that's awkward. I think streamers run into that a lot. Yeah, it was pretty hard to get simple answers. I got the thing about the room, I just didn't think it applies to my view. Like, I don't really see. Because I'm not claiming there's a room with only one door. Like, I think consciousness has, or minds have more than one door, more than one way you can get information, and I don't think perception is the only way to get information into a mind. Yeah, I find a lot of this stuff, it seems like they're starting in the middle. Like, I wanted to start at the basics. Um, but it very quickly, like, jumped into very complicated arguments. Like, he thinks rocks have a little bit of consciousness, and that's because there can't be a jump from not conscious to conscious. Like, I don't like a fetus, like the atoms in it have to be conscious the whole time or something. Even if the atoms in the fetus are conscious, like how does they form a mind? Like a human mind, that would also be a jump if you go from like non-human like carbon atom consciousnesses to the way human consciousness work. That seems like a jump too, so I don't quite get it. Yeah, just focusing on physics and computation makes a lot more sense to me. And focusing on like clear questions that come up in life. Like we're born and then we face a situation like we have to decide what choices to make, what actions to take, what interests to have, what's moral, what's effective for learning, and so on. And like that is sort of the human situation. And you could add other aspects like the need for food, the need for water, the need for sanitation, the need for shelter, the need for some control over your environment to make it livable and maintain your life, like farming and so on. And those are things that like directly come out of the human problem situation, like we're faced with that. There's like a clear reason for people to care about it and work on it. And then when they jump into these very abstract statements about the mind, it's much harder for me to see like why they think it matters or how they connect it to the earlier, clearer problem situation. Like I'm not against complexity in theory, but I think you should make sure you understand how you got to it and how it connects to the simpler things you actually understand. You don't want to just like jump into a bunch of complexity for no particular reason without like a clear purpose to it.
If you help someone because you see some virtue in them, like that they, I don't know, they seem to have some genuine intellectual curiosity and, you know, about some subject that you think is important, and you want to support that because you think there's not enough people that have that curiosity, and so you buy them a book or something, you know, or it could be more than that, but just as an example, and sort of a trivial example, that's totally fine. But if
But yeah, if it has impact, if it matters to anything I do, then it should be possible to like criticize something I do, like one of my choices, one of my values, one of my philosophical claims. Like, which of those is wrong because of my view on consciousness?
if you offer somebody some help because you feel guilty for having so much, that's bad. Because, you know, and again, I'm assuming in context of like you've earned what you have legitimately and all that sort of thing. You're not like a criminal or something. But, you know, if you have a job, you've worked hard, you've earned, you paid your way. Nobody has a claim on you and should allow you to feel, you know, should cause you to feel guilty because they have less and you have more or something like that. Um, and that's sort of double.
I also remember he was talking about indivisibility. I should write something down about that. And like that to me is really problematic for a variety of reasons, including that my understanding of vision is that our eyes actually look at a very tiny spot and they very quickly look at many different tiny spots in sequence. They don't just take everything in at once. That's an illusion. That is just a computation based on the raw input data, and we create the scene ourselves. That's not something that like, that's not our sense organs that do that. It is computation inside our head that creates a scene out of the data. And the data comes in a bunch of little parts, and putting it together is done by our algorithms. And you start like, you can divide it up again. You can look at, you can focus your attention on a specific spot. You can look at particular details. My take on emotions is they're basically just ideas that people have very bad introspection about. They don't understand what's going on there. I don't see the need for any more special explanation than that. Like, I think that satisfies. I think it accounts for people's claims. I think it accounts for all the data we have.
sort of doublethink about altruism is rampant in our society. You know, and there's cliches about it, like limousine liberals and stuff. But, you know, we have all these people that are clamoring for socialism and state redistribution of wealth. But, you know, like award shows in their fancy clothes when they took a jet to ride into, and, you know, they're going back out to their fancy car and checking stuff on Twitter on their iPhone. You know, it's just it's ridiculous, and it's because they're not real thinkers. They're not even trying to live their life in an integrated way. They're just trying to virtue signal, not to actually be virtuous, but to be in, to be hip, to be cool, and to maybe assuage their guilty conscience for every once in a while when they focus on that and they feel a bit guilty, and then they say, oh, well, I give $100,000 to the Democrats, so I feel better now, so I'll go back to being a rich hedonist or whatever. Anyway, so continues. However, modern usage has eroded his meaning of altruism. It's a little more than a synonym for generosity. So Rand's rejection of the original meaning is now often taken as a rejection of generosity, which is not. Well, if anybody does that, they're not reading Rand. I was trying to keep the screen uncluttered, but as soon as I wanted to resolve an issue regarding some words, out comes the dictionary and Apple books and the whole lot. Anyway, so this article with Mr. Gales, it says, however, modern usage has eroded his Comte's meaning of altruism to a little more than a synonym for generosity. So Rand's rejection of the original meaning is now often taken as a rejection of generosity, which it is not. Now, first of all, I would say often taken by whom and why are they reading Rand literally? And then the second, that sounds a little harsh, right? The second point is that I guess it somewhat depends on what you mean by generosity, and the context that exists in. But for the first issue, for just, you know, because we could certainly imagine a definition of a way of understanding generosity that is compatible, that is something that Rand would be okay with. And so sort of assuming that, and, you know, I looked up some definitions. Let's see here, Webster's third, liberality in spirit or act, and some synonyms, magnanimity, benevolence, certainly, you know, or quality of being kind and generous, and kindness is fine. Readiness or liberality in giving, that's not necessarily bad, but like it depends. Freedom from meanness or smallness of mind or character, certainly that would be okay. So this is philosophy who needs it. I brought up here. Faith and force destroys the modern world. I managed to find it using a lexicon. I thought for some reason that this quote was in the Virtue of Selfishness, and I searched that. Couldn't find it, so I decided to just break out the lexicon and hope it would be there. So do not confuse altruism with kindness, goodwill, or respect for the rights of others. These are not primary, but consequences which in fact altruism makes impossible. The irreducible primary of altruism, the basic absolute, is self-sacrifice, which means self-immolation, self-abnegation, self-denial, self-destruction, which means the self as a standard of evil, the selfless as a standard of good. So she's explicitly saying, you know, she's not taking altruism to be some sort of synonym with some vague notion of, you know, some kindness or goodwill. She's taking it precisely, and she's drawing out the logical consequences of taking it seriously. So if somebody's reading Rand, like, why aren't they reading philosophy who needs it? That's like an introductory, you know, text on this issue, or, you know, I mean, it's an introductory text on Rand. Like it's sort of, it's a broader oriented. It's not too technical. It's not like a, you know, introduction to objective epistemology or something. Anyway, there's something else I want to say actually, which is when like you have to look somebody at the cultural context. Like, consider the fact that, you know, we hear people like Bernie Sanders saying that billionaires shouldn't exist. I guess maybe I haven't verified this myself, but it sounds true. But he used to say millionaires shouldn't exist, but now he's a millionaire, so he had to recalibrate a little bit. But when people like Bernie Sanders say billionaires shouldn't exist, is that really compatible with altruism meaning just as an for generosity? Like, or does it mean that really altruism is being taken more fully seriously by some people in our culture today? I want to read a bit more. You know, any good analysis of what Rand means should involve.
Well, there's a lot of reasons they object to billionaires, other than like greed or lack of altruism. Like, they think that they get their wealth via exploitation. So that even if they would donate a lot of it, it'd still be a problem.
Should involve reading some amount of Rand. So in that spirit, I'm just going to read the next paragraph after the paragraph I already read, because I think it's really good. I just happen to see it because it's like the next one, right? Hopefully this doesn't carry into just like reading the whole book. Although there's worse YouTube videos that one can make than reading a bunch of Rand. Do not hide behind such superficialities as whether you should or should not give time to a beggar. That is not the issue. The issue is whether you do or do not have the right to exist without giving them that dime. The issue is whether you must keep buying your life dime by dime from any beggar who might choose to approach you. The issue is whether the need of others is the first mortgage on your life and the moral purpose of your existence. The issue is whether man is to be regarded as a sacrificial animal. Any man of self-esteem will answer no. Altruism says yes. Right? I mean, and when you get to should billionaires exist, it's essentially, you know, there's no amount of dimes that will let you, or it's what gets you out of that category. Like, you know, to whatever they say, whatever the Democrats set the maximum income to in the Sanders administration, right? That's where you can exist at. But then, you know, say, well, billionaires shouldn't exist, but some people say, well, billionaires shouldn't exist, but I guess 100 million is okay. Well, why that? There's, you know, there'll still be some people starving somewhere, right? So how can you justify that? So then you just get communism by degrees. Unless you sort of strike at the root and say no. You know, in the context of a free society, wealth is earned. No, you brutish idiot, it doesn't mean that somebody literally worked 100,000 times harder than another person when they become rich. It means, that's something I've seen recently. It means that they figured out some valuable service or product or whatever using their mind. You know, and engaged in trades that millions of people got value out of. And it's good that they were able to earn that wealth, and it's moral and proper that they should receive the benefit of that for what they provided to the world. Unless you go there and present that fully consistent case, then, you know, then we're going to get sort of communism by degrees. You know, the minimum wage and wealth redistribution drifting upward, and the tolerance, you know, for wealth drifting downward as the tax rate drifts upward, or maybe those are confiscating wealth, I don't know. And then, you know, we'll be Venezuela in a few decades. So it's really important to have that view of what altruism really means, and, you know, its political consequences, especially if you're going to be the foundation for economic education and doing, you know, political and economic commentary reaching out to the masses. And I guess, and this is what Charles was taking issue with, and I guess having now read a little bit of this, I agree. You know, this sort of soft selling of Rand, it's doing a disservice to her and perhaps alienating better people.
Holy shit, dude. Discord can stream now? Like, it can just record your screen and stream it? Like, to Twitch or something? Is that what I'm seeing here? Like, Discord equal OBS now? Wait, where do you stream it to? Like, to the Discord app? They've raised the limit from 10 to 50 people? Do you only stream, like, one specific window at a time? You only stream to people in your voice chat? So it's just like screen sharing? But they call it streaming. Is the only reason I would ever use this because I don't know how to use like OBS and YouTube or Twitch?
Because basically, like the libertarians are libertarians because they don't like rejecting altruism because they don't want to be like rejected as weirdos or whatever. It's not because you can be engaged with libertarianism in a serious way and not hear about Ayn Rand. So, a lot of people, maybe they never even heard of her. They just lack a basic familiarity. There's just some responsibility for that. But libertarians, my point is, libertarians are not in the group. They've certainly heard of Ayn Rand. They certainly, a lot of them have read at least some of her work. Maybe not very effectively, but they've had some exposure. And they didn't like something about it. And so, but then rather than, respecting that disagreement, maybe trying to resolve it, then sometimes they try and soft pedal her. And we saw the sort of the first soft pedaling here. And I looked ahead a bit, just my eyes glancing ahead. It gets worse, but this Ayn Rand's attacks on altruism are aimed at Comte's definition. That's trying to minimize the scope of what Ayn Rand is saying of criticism of altruism to the most consistent form, as opposed to, no, she rejected altruism categorically. She thought it was pure evil and poison and not good to any degree. Now you have to understand precisely what she meant by altruism. But if you actually read her stuff, then you can avoid misunderstandings that are apparently often taken. So this author continues, he quotes, in Roderick Long's words, that name sounds vaguely familiar to me, but I don't know who that is offhand. Here's sometimes misleading rhetoric about the virtue of selfishness. Again, misleading why and to whom was not to advocate the pursuit of one's own interest at the expense of others. That's like, I don't know how more extensively she could have covered. Like if he's saying that's the misleading part, that's extensively covered like everywhere. Like just read her stuff. I mean, she talks about repeatedly about the false dichotomy of sacrificing yourself to others or sacrificing others to yourself. As two sides of the same coin, two sides of the same false dichotomy of the same misconception. Which is that actually, is that morality has to involve sacrifice of somebody to somebody? She said no, it doesn't. She rejects the whole premise.
The thing with philosophy of mind, like I'll grant we don't know everything about it. I don't claim to have all the answers. But my view of what to do about that is, one, when we don't know something, just don't design your life around certain claims about it. Like, be neutral. Act in a way where it's going to be okay for a variety of correct answers. Which isn't that hard. Like, if I'm gonna have steak for dinner, I don't know what like philosophy of mind theory would say that's a bad idea. Like for most of life, you just act normal and it's fine for many different philosophy of minds, so you're okay. And then the second thing is, if we want to learn more about it, how do we do that? And my answer is we take the stuff where we like know about it and know how to make progress and we're productive, and we expand that. We take like sister fields and related fields that have some relevance and we build on them. We take things where we actually know what we're doing, like epistemology, and even to some extent psychology. Psychology is like a lot more approachable. Like there's a lot more data. You can deal with it better. Like the actual people working on it are mostly not that good in my opinion, but like the concept of the field is okay. You could be a rational psychologist who's working on it or something. Anyway, psychologists basically just study cultures and like try to understand how cultures work and like what people in the culture do and what the common problems are, and not all aspects of culture, but like specific ones about how people think and what they feel good and bad about, and like what causes them a lot of stress. And anyway, and you take other fields like physics and computer science and you build on those as well, and then we just keep working on those fields, and the better we get at them, the easier it gets to make some progress in philosophy of mind. Like the better intellectual tools we have, the easier it's going to be to deal with philosophy of mind later. And the better we understand neurons and various relevant sciencey stuff, the easier it's going to be later. And so on. So I think we just keep working on areas where we have clear paths to be productive. And there's no need to skip ahead to to other stuff that has no like immediate urgency and that we don't really know how to work on very productively. But other people seem to want to just sort of jump into the middle of the deep end and say like dozens and dozens of fancy words and concepts and relate them all together and sort of build this castle in the sky that's not very well connected to other fields. And I think that's a bad method. There's a sort of impatience where they want all the answers now, but they come up with all these speculations where they don't have the tools yet to decide between the different speculations they're making. They don't have good enough ways of testing what they're saying or criticizing it or objectively judging it and figuring out what's crap. And when you're trying to speculate a bunch and you don't have good enough criticism and error correction, then it's not productive.
She rejected not only the subordination of one's interests to those of others, and it is this rather than mere benevolence that she labeled altruism, but also the subordination of others' interests to one's own. Okay, well that sounds, I mean, it's weird because he says misleading rhetoric, but then he kind of just restates her position. That's kind of weird. I mean, maybe this guy isn't being fairly quoted or something. There's a lot of ellipses. Anyway, Rand's category.
Is this guy just like a pure troll, or is there anything else to it? What does he mean? Like, I don't even know what he means by timeline. Is it a bad joke? Or is he just trying to cause trouble? Or does timeline mean something specific? I think he's best ignored.
Rand's categorical rejection of altruism was a rejection of Comte's requirement of total selflessness. No. I mean, that's not a full statement. Rand's categorical rejection of altruism was a categorical rejection of altruism, including a rejection of total selflessness, and any lesser degree thereof. Like she rejected 100% selflessness, she rejected 1% selflessness.
Yeah, you're right, Justin. This article's dumb. That's a very clear point. Like,
you can't really. I mean, 1% selflessness isn't really like a stable. Like if you're that close to work, I mean, a lot of people are like, I don't know, it's a high percentage in that. Because it's just like if you're that close to work, then you're just like not, you've got like the intellectual equipment in place. You just haven't taken a full inventory of your mind and your value.
she was definitely responding to things other than Comte. And aren't there some in fucking Philosophy Who Needs It at the beginning? Oh, maybe none of these are about altruism. I thought there was one. I just read most of them. I didn't find anything about altruism. Oh, it's evil because it's selfish. Here it is. Okay, and she says that's from Kant. So she's saying she rejects Kant's altruism, where Kant claims selfishness is evil. So she's not just arguing with Comte. Comte, I don't know how to pronounce it. So yeah, she's clearly rejecting something other than Comte.
And your values or something, but you're pretty close.
And this is like an Oist writing an article called What Rand Meant by Altruism. He should know that. She is targeting Christian ethics to some extent, but not exclusively. I was just trying to check, was this guy a Christian? I don't remember much about the name offhand or like anything. Founder of Positivism. Well, that's awful. Okay, so he was born at like the French Revolution. The Wikipedia is easier to understand. They're just like, he was a French philosopher who wrote about positivism. Like, okay, that's the information I wanted. Yeah, I was just trying to check his religion, because I know Rand disliked Christian altruism. I wanted to see if this guy was a Christian. That's not saying anything about it. Oh, Comte's secular religion is no vague effusion of humanistic piety, but a complete system. Is some sort of secular humanist thing? Go to the beginning. Oh, social theories culminated in his religion of humanity. Non-theistic. Okay, so not a Christian. Oh, he may have coined the word altruism. Yeah, Wikipedia had the right info just at the top. Like, paragraph 1, paragraph 3. Much better than the Stanford one for this. Okay, so, right, not Kant and not a Christian. Definitely not everything Rand's arguing with.
You're pretty close. So this continues because that was inconsistent with any individuals mattering for their own sake. So just to give you a sense of the level of underselling of Rand's ideas in this, by saying she rejected total selflessness. So I just actually noticed this juxtaposition, and I have to notice that sort of thing when I'm going back and reading around, like, hey, I didn't notice this exact parallel at different points in the book before, but when you search for things, you notice. So to give you a sense of the extent to which Rand rejected even a scintilla of selflessness, of altruism, even the smallest bit. So one of the worst characters, Peter Keating's mom. Peter Keating is the sort of uber second-hander in The Fountainhead who shows the problems of leading a second-handed life through his life and how he lives it. And Peter Keating wants to marry this girl, but his mother doesn't approve and wants like a better match for him, socially. And she says it's not important, but she's doing the fake, like, oh, don't mind just a little me, but it'd be nice if you thought of me, sort of like manipulative thing. And she says it's not important, but take just a tiny notice of that. Think of yourself for an hour, but give 1 minute to the thought of others, right? So this is one of the worst characters in the book saying this. Think of yourself for an hour, but give 1 minute to the thought of others. And what does work say? I came here to say that I do not recognize anyone's right to 1 minute of my life, nor any part of my energy, nor any achievement of mine, no matter what they claim, how large the number, or how great their need. So that's a big contrast, right? So it wasn't just total selflessness that Rand rejected. She rejected any selflessness. She rejected any self-sacrifice. She rejected any altruism, comprehensively, 100%, fully, down to the root. And one thing, I don't know how much that background noise is getting picked up.
Well, the thing Rourke said there specifically was that no one has a right to it. Like, people take her as just being 100% anti-charity, which I don't think is correct. What she really doesn't like is when they demand it and say, like, you're morally required to do it. Like, optional charity is a bit different. It's overrated, like, people go wrong with it in various ways, and altruism, like, leads to over-donating and stuff, but it doesn't mean, like, all charity is automatically evil. But when charity is demanded of you as something you're required to do, then that's an attack on your property rights and your self-interest.
But one thing that I find, all right, there's some background I get that. It's distracting. So one thing that I really don't like here is they're partially restating Rand's stuff, but also softening her, but in a very subtle and confusing way, where it's just like almost you have to be like an objectivist to spot the error already. And that's really because it seems like it's sort of agreeing. Where it's like, oh yeah, Rand disagreed with Comte. Like if you take it vaguely and generally and you just get a gist from it, it seems like it's roughly accurate or consistent with other stuff that you might have heard. But it is softening her view, and this is material that I think is maybe oriented towards people who don't have prior exposure to Rand, so it gives them a really misleading picture of her seriousness about the altruism issue. And like that sort of thing is common. Like when somebody takes a really strong position that stands out on something, like means to saying socialism is impossible. It's not a way of organizing society. It can't work. It just no go. And then people go, oh well, what he meant was no, what he meant was what he said. And I get that it can be difficult to wrap your brain around that sort of thing. But if the counterintuitiveness of a bold original idea is difficult for you to wrap your brain around, then you shouldn't be writing about like what Rand meant by altruism essays. Anyway, so Rand vehemently opposed such an invalidation, meaning an invalidation of individuals mattering for their own sake, I guess, of individual significance. Okay, and then they quote Rand apparently without any citation, which is really weird. But the basic principle of altruism is that man has no right to exist for his own sake. It serves others as the only justification of his existence, and that self-sacrifice is his highest moral duty, virtue, and value. Okay. Rand's virtue of selfishness was a response to Comte's demand for complete selflessness. Not only is a requirement for everyone to completely disregard themselves an unattainable ideal, it is self-contradictory. Well, it is unattainable. Again, this is a little muddy because it says not only is a requirement for everyone to completely disregard themselves an unattainable ideal, it is self-contradictory. Because self-contradictory is a stronger logical claim. But unattainable ideal sort of sounds kind of like when people say, well, socialism is good in theory, but not in practice. It'd be nice if we could do it, but it's we can't actually do it. Maybe, and sometimes it's like men aren't good enough to do socialism. Which is like that argument is one of the reasons why socialism is on the march. Because it's sort of like a challenge. Like, oh, of course we can do good enough. But it's like altruism is a bad ideal. One thing is it's by venerating others' need, you sort of elevate the suffering, misery, and poverty or whatever of others into a sort of a primary value, and so you need it to be moral. Like somebody, if the good is doing for others, then you need others to do good for. And like the worse off they are, how people seem to take it is like the worse off other people are, then that's like a bigger opportunity for you to do good. So then you're just like looking, like rather than focusing on your own life and trying to improve that, which is the thing that you have most direct control over is your life, your mind. You sort of go on this fishing expedition, finding finding like the most miserable people you can find in order to help them. If you can't find any, maybe you make up some people who are suffering, which is kind of like what the whole grievance SJW thing is about. Studies and all that. And it's also just bad for one's psychology to be the sort of person who's like, looking for unfortunate victims of life to dispense favor to from on high. That's not gonna, as opposed to being, a self-interested trader who's seeking out and offering values. Those are two very different ways of approaching life. I think it shows well in an essay that I decided to discuss. I didn't have a lot to say about it. So this person continues. So they say,
I don't know, the essay's pretty bad. Were there any good essays in the book? If the book has any good essays, then maybe you could have picked one of those.
not only is a requirement for everyone to completely destroy themselves an unattainable ideal, it is self-contradictory. You cannot possibly sacrifice yourself fully for me while I'm also sacrificing myself fully for you. Now, this doesn't give a lot of detail as to what the author has in mind, but I'm guessing it's something along the lines of like, if X is trying to sacrifice for Y's benefit, then X is giving up some values for Y to Y, and then if Y is doing the same, then they're both
Oh, you recorded this in a bunch of chunks, and you have your chunks showing.
giving up things for each other. They're also getting values, so then maybe they would have to, even if it's like unwanted gift tier values, it's still values, so then they would have to give those values up to the other person, and so it's just sort of it's like in circle or something like that. But I don't, assuming that's what they had in mind, I see what you're saying, but like I think there's better criticisms of altruism than that. One example, which I don't know if this person deals with it given the length of the essay. I'm just reading ahead a little bit here. I'm thinking, it doesn't seem like they're going to mention it, but the 20th Century Motor Company and Atlas Shrugged is a great example of the morality of altruism in practice, and an example of like the things that go wrong. And one of the things is, if you can't benefit yourself, if you work harder, you don't get the benefit. If you come up with a new invention, or you get such an attenuated amount of the benefit, like 1 divided by the number of people who your value is being redistributed to.
Why are you recording loopback? I'm wondering. See, mine's just recording my mic. Are you running some like audio filters in real time while doing ScreenFlow recordings before it gets recorded?
Then what's the real benefit to you of creating values? Like what's the point? What do you, if you just think it's such a tiny, if you have to do a whole bunch of extra work to get a tiny benefit, like why bother? And so then maybe people try and resort to coercion in order to get the best work out of you. So then we transition from a system in which people are incentivized by monetary rewards and values to create value into a system in which people have to deal with whips and chains and guns as their incentive, quote unquote, to create value. And you might say, well, that sounds like an issue of socialism or communism instead of altruism. Altruism is just, communism is just in a way that sort of the political implementation of altruism from each according to his ability, each according to his need, is very consistent.
Oh, I don't think I have big noise problems. You had like an appliance or something making noise, or a fan, I forgot.
With the values of altruism. Another issue is, you can't actually, like the individual person is in the best position to know like what he values and what he wants. So he's the one who should be taking actions to get the values that he wants in the world, as opposed to relying on having other people act for his benefit. It's kind of like, gifts often don't work that well. There's like if particularly badly if the person is like picky about or has strong preferences about the thing that you're trying to get them a gift for. Because like it might be hard for them when they're doing it to figure out what they should buy, even though they know they have like the best idea of what they want. So when another person tries to figure out what to get them, then it just doesn't work. And so you base a whole morality around trying to put others above yourself. It's gonna be a mess because nobody's gonna be acting to serve the thing that he has the most knowledge about how to serve, which is his own life. There's tons of arguments. And there's the fact that somebody has some, the fact that somebody is worse off is not a claim against anybody else. Like you didn't hurt, assuming a standard context, like you didn't hurt them, you didn't steal from them. The fact that somebody's poor, you don't have to, as like I said, buy your life dime by dime from every beggar. So you can argue against altruism in lots of different ways. If you're gonna go the logical route, you should maybe spell it out a little bit more. So let's continue. And if no one has any intrinsic value, why would the results, even if possible, be mere? Quote. No sight. Is it coming? That's so weird. Who does that? Those who start by saying it is selfish to pursue your own wishes, you must.
Oh, is there bad scholarship? I'm gonna go back a little.
Has real significance. An omnipresent duty of self-sacrifice also makes people vulnerable to manipulation by those who disguise power over others as really a means to attain some noble goal. Omnipresent duty of self-sacrifice also makes. Altruist ideals in general, even if people are not, living them consistently, they do help the bad people, sure. The desire to sacrifice for the good of others can be transformed into the requirement to sacrifice to the desires of leaders. Has Rand expressed it? And again, no quote. No sight. Is it coming? That's so weird. Who does that? Those who start by saying it is selfish to pursue your own wishes, you must sacrifice them.
Okay, you found an essay where they just like quote Rand with no source. It was like published in a book? What the fuck? Do you check for like endnotes instead of footnotes or something? There should be like a little superscript number at least, if there was that.
Sacrifice them to the wishes of others, and by saying the selfish hold your convictions, you must sacrifice them to the convictions of others. I'm getting from this Rand quote here is, there's thought and action are intimately linked, and if you can't pursue what you think is right, you're basically, you can't use your judgment to act in the world. And how can you even, if you can't act on your ideas, then you're going to lose them. You can't sever that connection. So you've accepted the premise that people are asking you to accept. If somebody says it is selfish to pursue your own wishes, you must sacrifice them to the wishes of others, and you say okay. Then when they say it is selfish to uphold your convictions, you must sacrifice them. So self-ownership. It just seems to say that self-ownership is the starting point. I wouldn't I wouldn't deny that, like, you own your body, like I own my body, and that's, I get to decide what to do with it, what you know what things to subject would agree with that. But her point was much, much broader than that. And this piece sort of subtly misrepresents the broader critique in order to try and engage in some sort of, making libertarianism and Rand's view more compatible by washing out some of the distinctive characteristics of Rand's views, which people might find alienating. And I don't think that sort of project is moral or intellectually honest. And I think it's actually dishonest to posit what Rand meant by altruism when you don't actually know what she meant by altruism, and it becomes clear that that's the case that you don't know as you read the essay. So I did not like the essay, and I thought it was.
Hey, wait, is this essay literally 4 pages long? You made this whole video and it was 4 pages? I thought it was longer than that.
I thought it was pretty bad, and I'm glad though for having gone through the exercise of going through the concretes, because it seems like the sort of thing where if you read it, if you sort of skimmed it, low resolution, just you gotta focus. You're like, oh yeah, Rand, altruism bad, bad for liberty, right? It's good, sure. And you might think, no, this is fine, when it's actually bad in lots of subtle, detailed ways. So okay, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's perfectly possible to have a lot of comments on a short text. We wrote like 500 pages about Luli's like 1-page Facebook post.
I like to keep my videos approximately an hour. This is running around a little long, but I'm going to cut it out now, end it now, and maybe I'll look at some.
Luli had no rebuttal. Alright, later guys.